Now, this webinar focuses on major donors, and I'm going to share both the theory behind major donor giving, as well as how you could apply that to practice. So first things first, I know the title says improving your conversations with major donors, but I think it would be more accurate to say that we need to build a relationship that starts with lead generation after we identify a good prospect and continues with the conversations we're going to have, which is probably it's not going to be just one. And then after we secure a major gift, that's, in a way, that's when the relationship really begins. We need to continue and deepen the relationship with major donors so that we prove to them that they've made a difference, but also give them reason to make another gift, maybe. So starting with lead generation, who is a good major gift prospect? Obviously, people with a lot of money, right? So that's why we consider capacity. And of course, if they've done something for this cause or this organization in the past, that's also a good indication. However, as it is true for any area of giving, whether that's individual giving, legacy, major gifts, there are two concepts or elements that are also very helpful and indicative of their behavior. The first one is their connection to the cause, and the other one is their connection to the organization, which is their commitment. So we think that it's crucial to also get that information, and that will help you identify who you should be talking to. So starting with supporter identity or connection to the cause, probably you've heard us talk about this a number of times, but very briefly, this is the part of who they are that brings them to a specific cause. It's some personal experience they might have with a cause and that makes them want to support it. It could be shared values or beliefs, or for example, for health organization, it's the fact that they might have the disease themselves or someone close, or environmentalists go to conservation charities and so on. So it's something that they own that brings them to the cause. It's nothing to do with you or this specific organization. Commitment, on the other hand, is all about you and your brand. Commitment signals their loyalty to your organization, and it could predict whether they're going to do more things for you. And it's not just a fuzzy concept, it can be measured. There are 3 statements that you can use to measure someone's commitment. And it goes from 0 to 10, and obviously the higher it is, the higher the commitment. And of course, we're not saying you should ignore capacity. It's very important to know the capacity scores of your supporters, so then you know who to target for a major gift. But just focusing on capacity isn't very helpful, because just because I have money doesn't mean I care about a specific cause or that I feel connected to a specific organization. So focusing on that it might not give you the best or the most promising leads for a major gift. And on the other hand, there might be people that have high commitment to a specific organization, and they have a supporter identity that connects them to the cause. And even though they don't have much money, they would be willing to make a major gift. So for example, looking at this graph, you see a distribution of donors. Each blue bar is an individual donor, and you can see them along a wealth distribution on the x-axis, going from left, not so much money, to the right, people with lots of money. And you'll notice there are some additional scores at the top of each bar. That's their commitment scores. So you have people with really high commitment, 10, 9, or even 8, and people with not so high commitment, 7 or 6. Now, if you only focus on capacity scores, that will give you these 5 donors at the right end of this distribution, where you have a mix of people who are highly committed and a couple who are not so committed. But if you include their commitment into consideration, that gives you a lot more promising prospects. You have people who have really high commitment scores, 10, 9, or 8, and that have some capacity for a major gift that would have been ignored if we only focused on capacity before. So a much smarter strategy is to focus on people with high commitment, regardless of their wealth, and not focus on wealthy people with a score of, let's say, of commitment score of 7. So you can't ignore a 10 to go talk to a 7 just because of their wealth. That is a suboptimal strategy. Okay, so let's say we've identified who our prospects are. Now we need to start talking to them, pick up the phone or go visit them. And how do we structure a conversation? The first thing we need to do is find out some things about them. As I said, identity and commitment are crucial to know. And by asking for their identity, which is going to be different for every organization, can help you structure not just the first conversation, but every other conversation you're going to have with them. You need to play back who they are, their values, the values that you both share, and how support of this organization can help them express who they are. Now, part of the first conversation ideally should be a question around their commitment. Like I said, there is a validated scale, but I appreciate it might not be ideal to interrupt the conversation to hand them out a scale to fill in. However, so I appreciate it might be difficult, but there is a way to apply it. Maybe you can ask them as a follow-up email or text, or however they prefer to be contacted, to fill out some information about themselves, and that's when you ask. The point is that if we appreciate the additional value that knowing their commitment brings, then we can work towards finding a way to discover that, so we can make smarter decisions on who to spend our time and effort on. Now, why do I keep saying about the need to prime their identity and play it back? I'll share a case study that we've done with a client. It was a conservation charity, and our insights work with them discovered that they had 2 supporter identities: people who were passionate about helping birds, and we call them bird enthusiasts, and people who are passionate about nature overall, and we call them nature enthusiasts. And as part of hen raising activity that they were doing, people would call in to get their activity packs. And as part of that conversation, we said, okay, let's adapt the script. And let's start the conversation by asking people who they are. So the first thing we did is ask people whether they're bird enthusiasts, nature enthusiasts, or neither. And based on their response, we adapted the rest of the script, which, yes, it told people that they're going to receive their activity pack, but fundraisers also asked people if they would like to become a member with a monthly gift. And the way we framed that membership ask depended on their identity. So we would say that you can have access to our parks and in order for you to watch birds, or in order for you to enjoy nature, or when we were talking about benefit, we would frame it around what your money could do to help birds or nature, depending on what they said in that initial question. And by doing that, we increased conversion to membership by 15% and average donor value by £10. Now, I know this is a case study around individual giving and conversion to membership, but the principle is the same for everyone. People are people, and we all have identities, and we all want to express them. So you can do the same thing with your major donors. You can start the conversation with a question about them and their connection to your cause, and then build the rest of the conversation around that. In addition to supporter identity, which you can see listed here as the first motive, there are other motives that trigger giving and helping behavior that are shared across all donor segments. So whether you give $10 or $10,000, Some motives are the same. We discussed about supporter identity. The second one is the need to make a difference. Another motive is how the donation and how helping others makes you feel. It makes you feel warm glow. It might make you feel proud for who you are, and that can be linked back to supporter identity. It might make you feel good about your self-image, but it also can make you feel great about how other people perceive you. And all of that is known as intrinsic motivation because it comes from the person within us. And on the other hand, we have external motives, which could be premiums, social pressure, things that don't come from the person itself, and which is why they might actually be detrimental. Very briefly, this covers some of the basic motives behind giving, which are shared between individual donors and major donors. But major donors are special, and there are some motives that are unique to them. And this is the list that we're going to briefly cover each one of them. So the first one, it might be very easy or spontaneous to give $20, but if you're going to make a major gift, you need to think about it. So major gifts are planned, and they might even be considered more as investments rather than support from major donors. And that's why when major donors consider to leave a gift, they focus on organizations that they perceive them to be well-run, healthy financially, and that they can prove that they make a difference. So during your initial conversations, in order to help people trust your charity and its efficiency and effectiveness, you need to have at hand some maybe financial reports, overhead information. All that is very useful at this stage before any gift has been made, in order to convince major donors that you're well worth their gift. The other thing that major donors care about, which is slightly different from other donors, is the actual impact of the donation. Now, there are two different ways to talk about impact. There is the what we call output, which could be described as what each amount could achieve. So think about the shopping list, and $20 can buy medicine, or $50 could buy food. All of these are examples of output of what a donation could do potentially. But also you have the actual impact information, which is information that comes from the field, and it gives you an idea of the impact you've made on the cause. And major donors care about that information. In one test, researchers created an emotional letter and then a test letter that included some impact information. And when they analyzed the results, they found actually no difference between the two letters overall. But then when they analyzed the results based on the supporters' previous giving behavior and previous value, they found a very interesting finding. People who gave a lot of money, they gave even more when impact information was shared with them. Whereas people who gave less money, they gave even less. And the theory behind that is that people who give low amounts, they're mostly driven by emotion, and it's a more impulsive donation, and information about impact might dampen that feeling, and that's why it reduces giving. On the other hand, people who give a lot of money, they are thinking more about the gift and the impact it could have, and that's why adding impact information was beneficial for that group. So to sum up, when you have a conversation with a potential major donor, you need to have at hand information about your financial health and how efficiently you use your money, but also information around actual impact. Maybe you have impact reports from the field that they will be used. That kind of information will be useful at that point. Now, going back to output information, which is the potential impact that your donation could have, there's another difference here between individual donors and major donors. Major donors care mostly about the difference they will make as an individual, not that we could together make as the whole of the supporters or the organization. And they've tested that with two different ads. One ad that is focusing on more on the community and what the community could achieve together to reduce poverty, and another ad which is very similar, with the only difference being that instead of emphasizing what the community can do, you emphasize what the person can do. You can be a lifesaver. You could do something to reduce poverty. And in another version of these ads, again, the community message focused on what on the fact that one community needs to come forward, and against that they compared an ad that focused that one individual needs to come forward. And they found that wealthier people were more motivated with the ads that focused on personal goals. And that could be because wealthy people have learned to rely more on themselves. They know that they can be independent. They don't really need the community to achieve their goals. And maybe that's why that message resonates with them. Another thing that separates them is their desire to be more involved. Some major donors want charities not to just accept their money, but also their opinions and advice. And so one very simple test that shows this is this reply form test, where against the control version, where you ask to fill in your donation, and there is also information about the areas of the charity's work. They tested a version where you could choose which area is more important to you. There is no, the donation is not restricted. There is no reference to that. It's just, we're just asking for their opinion. And that version increased the average gift of wealthier people. Now, as I said, this is a very simple example of asking for their opinion, and it's something that you might not do with major donors, but it proves the value of involving them a bit more. But the first thing you need to do is discover if that's something they'd like to do, because not all of them will want to be more involved. Some will be happy to give you the money once they've decided that they trust you, that you're an efficient and effective organization. They might be happy to just give you the money and and they don't want to hear about anything else or be involved. But some people do, and for those, you have the opportunity to get them more involved, to allow them to give an opinion. Maybe you could share an issue that you have with a project, maybe even allow them to provide a solution for that issue. And by doing that, you are increasing their trust, but also you deepen the relationship with them, which might lead to more gifts in the future. Now this, I don't need to say a lot of things about the sense of responsibility, just that a significant portion of major donors are driven by this sentiment. And this is a statistic that came from the Giving Pledge, and that was a pledge to give 50% of your wealth over your lifetime. And 53% of philanthropists who participated in that pledge said that they were driven by a sense of responsibility. Now, I mention it because it's important to know that, because if someone is driven by that, it's important to play that back as well as their identity in your conversations. Finally, recognition. There is a debate whether it's good or bad. There is some evidence that recognition might be beneficial and can increase giving, because it allows people to become a leader, to show and to set an example for others to follow. The amount that one person gives can signal what the appropriate amount is, and then people similar to them might try to follow them. Also, if recognition is public, it allows people to build a more positive social image, and we talked about how that's one of the motives driving giving. So by making a public donation, you can signal in a socially acceptable way your wealth and build a positive image. But also, if donations are public, that might increase average gifts and how much people are willing to give in order to avoid being the person who gave the least money. Just as we feel proud when we are the highest contributor, we also feel shame when we're the least one. So any organization that offers some kind of recognition typically attracts larger donations. And also strategies like category reporting are also successful because people will try to give the least required amount in order to join a category, but also people who are at an upper level of a category, they might upgrade their gift in order to achieve the status that comes with the next category. So all of this suggests that recognition is good and it could be good, but again, it's not for everyone. There might be people that are turned off by recognition. And one hypothesis is that people who are driven by a sense of responsibility towards others or the society, they might prefer to give anonymously and they might not want to be recognized. So if you by default recognize all major donors, they might actually be turned off by that. And also there are preferences about how we want to be recognized. Some people might prefer private recognition, some will welcome naming opportunities. And again, this is not an obstacle, this is an opportunity for you to deepen the relationship, ask for their preferences, honor them, and increase their commitment to your organization. So to conclude this section, the major donors have some unique characteristics, and these are the principles here listed, but each one of these can be worded and expressed in a different way, and we don't know which one will be most successful. So as an example, I've created a table where each row represents one of these unique characteristics, and each column represents a different way to talk about it. So when you talk about impact, you can focus on the impact that the charity has already made, or that the supporter could potentially have, or you can combine the two, what the charity has already achieved and what you as a person could achieve. Or maybe you could ask them to fund a specific time-limited project, which implicitly gives them an idea of the impact that they could personally have. When it comes to trusts, is it better to use financial reports, or is it better to focus on impact? Or it's even better to use an example of how other major gifts have been used. For agency or otherwise they desire to be more involved, do you not provide it at all? Do you make it a default that everyone can have a say? Or do you offer them the choice to opt out or to choose from a list of things that they could be involved in? Same for recognition. Is it best to offer no recognition overall, private, public, or offer them the choice? And for sense of responsibility, what do you focus on? Do you focus on their responsibility towards other people, towards society as a whole, or the responsibility to give back to the people and places that helped you? So all of these are potential effective messages, but we can't guess which one is more effective. And if we were to test this in the field, that would create a huge problem. It would take years. So what could you do? You could run A/B testing on steroids, or as we call it, the pre-test tool, which what it does is it asks people to participate to an online task where they see two different communications, a letter on the left and a letter on the right. And all we ask people to do is to pick the one they prefer. And in the background, what the software is doing is it combines the different cells of that table that we've seen to create a communication. So here, all the red cells created the communication on the left, all the green ones, the communication on the right. And by making a choice, a person implicitly tells us which versions of each principle they prefer. And because each person makes about 10 choices and we're going to ask about 300 people, we now have the volume and the power we need to know which versions are most preferred. So by the end of this, you'll know for each principle which wording is the most successful, and this can be 100% customized to your brand and your tone of voice. But also you'll know from all of these principles which ones are the most influential ones. So if you only have 10 minutes to talk to major donors, what are the things you should be focusing on, and what could you leave out? Now, all of this until this point can help you get a major gift. But as I said, that should be the beginning of the relationship with a major donor. There are things that you can do after you get a gift, and there's insight that you can use after that to deepen the relationship, and hopefully that can lead to another gift. Now, every successful relationship, any kind of relationship, is characterized by these three elements: commitment, satisfaction, and trust. We talked about commitment, but what I may not have mentioned is that commitment is not a static measure. You can influence it, you can change it. You could decrease commitment if donors are not satisfied with what they receive from you, for example, but you could also increase commitment by sending them material they care about, by priming their identity and values. So it's up to you to increase a donor's loyalty to the organization by increasing their commitment. Trust is all about being transparent, keeping promises, admitting to mistakes. So anything that increases trust in any kind of relationship. Finally, satisfaction, that is the most important driver of loyalty. There's been shown to be a difference in retention even when you go from satisfied to very satisfied. That's how important satisfaction is. And satisfaction will depend on whether the quality of the interactions with your organization is good, whether you are responsive to any requests, whether the material you send them and you talk to them about are relevant with who they are, but also whether you ask for their preferences and fulfill them. Preferences around, as we discussed, desire to be involved or recognition, but also how they'd like to be contacted, how frequently, what kind of content they're interested in. So all of this can affect loyalty, and there are some strategies that you could use in order to improve all of these elements, and they're known as stewardship strategies. And as an example, I'm going to list a few here. The first one, relationship nurturing. That's all about deepening the relationship by creating more opportunities to interact. You wish them happy birthday, for example. You invite them to special occasions. You offer them opportunities to voice their opinion, all of that. Another strategy, which is called reciprocity, it has two elements. One is appreciation, which is when you show gratitude for what they've done, but also recognition. And that goes back to the conversation we had about public acknowledgement. Another strategy has to do with responsibility, and this is all about acting responsibly in order to increase trust. Like I said, is all about keeping promises, admitting to mistakes, being transparent. And finally, reporting is, I think this is used often. It's about sharing information with the major donor around financial statements or impact reports and so forth. Now, all of these strategies can have an impact on the three key elements of any successful relationship: trust, satisfaction, and commitment. But you might be surprised about which ones have a positive effect and which ones actually might have a negative effect. Relationship nurturing strategies are very beneficial. So anything you can do around that, or you are already doing it, keep doing it and scale it. Now, when it comes to reciprocity, appreciation, no-brainer, yeah, it makes a positive difference. But when it comes to recognition, there is evidence that sometimes it can have a negative impact. And maybe now, after we've talked about recognition and how not everyone is driven by it and that some people might actually be turned off by it, that finding isn't as surprising. people with a heightened sense of responsibility, for example, could be the ones that are turned off, and that's why this strategy has a negative effect. Any strategy around increasing trust is positive, and finally, reporting has been shown to have a negative impact as well. Now, how can that be? Kiki, you told us in the beginning of this webinar that major donors care about the efficient organizations, and they want to see financial statements, and that's what we're doing with the reporting. So how can it be negative? Yes, major donors care about that information before they make a decision to donate. After they've given their gift, mentally they've checked the box that you are a well-run, efficient organization. So at that point, they don't need to see that anymore. They've trusted you with their gift. They know that you can use it efficiently. Now, maybe what you need to do is focus on their impact rather than financial reports. So to sum up, whether you want to improve the way you identify major prospects, or whether you want to improve your conversations or your stewardship, there is a ton of insight from behavioral science that you can use. And if you'd like to know more about it, please get in touch with either me or Charlie.